Hey everybody, so I wanted to do the demo that I showed you all yesterday in class. Just go over it quickly so that you all have this available for you. And this file, of course, is on Canvas if you do want to use it. And I've made some slight adjustments and changes to the file already, so yours will be slightly different. Mine already has the underdrawing for parts of the animation that I want to use. So remember, I hope it's looking clear on the recording. For some reason, it's lagging a lot. But remember, so I need to think about where my joints are with my animation and I'm sorry, with my puppet, where my joints are, and if I need to place underdrawing underneath. So here I've put a little bit of a neck, and I could actually probably create more of a neck. What is going on? Maybe like start to bring it up like this. And of course, when you do this, you want to be nice and neat and clean and get rid of any edge aliasing or artifacts or material that doesn't look great. Because I just grabbed this from the internet, we can see kind of like the white outlines, which you wouldn't want that to have that on your animation and your puppet. So I'm going to save this. And let's go into After Effects. So I'll go ahead and I'll import my file. So where is it? Here we go. And I want to make sure that when I get to this stage, I say composition, retain layer sizes. And so that will allow me to open up the composition and I have all these layers down here. I'm just gonna change my size for my composition so that we're working in a composition that is the appropriate size. So let's change this to 1920 by 1080. That gives us a little bit more space and just working in a standard size. So the first things that we started to look at the other day were changing the anchor points of our arms and our legs and the head. And so what I'm going to do is I can come up to this tool. It's also the Y button on the keyboard. So I'm going to use that moving forward, the Y button. And I can move my arm anchor point. I'm going to come to my head, grab this, move the anchor point, come to the leg, and one by one move all the pieces. Body, that's the one that we'll probably deal with last, but we can change the anchor point maybe towards more of the hips. And let's turn off the body so we can see where our arm lines up. I probably should have rounded this off just in case for some reason I needed it to be if we ever saw the back edge, but there we go. So now we've got anchor points in all the right spots. So this allows us to open up our rotation. So I can come in here and I can go into my transform and I can go to rotation this way. Or remember, I can always hit R on the keyboard and that will allow me to bring rotation up. So I can start having the arm swing around, round and round. And I'm dragging on the second side number. If I drag this first number, that's like a full 360 degrees, so it doesn't do anything unless it's animated. But we haven't turned on the keyframes yet. So next, what we want to do is we want to start parenting our body parts to our body. So remember, if we take our body and we move it, and I need to go back to my selection tool, which is V. So I'll do that. if I grab my body, we want the rest of the body parts to move with it. So what I can do is I can come up to arm 2, take this little spiral symbol, it's called parenting, click on it, hold, and drag it down to body. And now you can see when I select body and move body, it will move with it. So that's great. So I'm going to do that also with the head and with the other arm. And now it all moves. Now I'm going to show you what happens if we do it with the legs. So I'll parent leg 1 and leg 2 to body. And now our whole character moves. That's wonderful. But like if I wanted my character to pivot from the hips a little bit, so I'm going to say rotate here on the body. It's rotating everything, including the legs, and we don't want that. That's kind of like one of the problems of doing this makeshift puppet rig versus using actual Duik or something like that. So we don't want that. So I'm actually there is a way around it, and I'm going to unparent the 2 legs. I'm going to come up here to layer, new, null object. And now I'm going to take this null object. This is something that doesn't render, but it gives me an anchor point. So I'm going to put this maybe like right here. Yeah, that seems good for the hips. And now I'm going to parent my body to the null object. And I'm also going to parent the legs to the null object. So now I have a controller, this null object, that I could use to move the entire body if I do want to move the entire body. But I also have an option to come into my body and rotate my body without having to rotate the legs. And so this is an instance where I would probably want to make sure that I have cleaned up the legs a bit more and the hips a bit more, so that like if it's a really far lean forward, well, one, we would want this leg to be in the back, but we are missing a little bit of the leg here, so we would want to make sure that that comes up high enough to fill in the gap. So this is a way that we can start working with adding a hip joint as well, making sure that we have this null object. And now, oops, now I can grab it and make sure that I have the null object selected. I can hit P to open up position, or again, remember, come into the transformations and I can move it all. So this is our first very basic rig that allows us to do very basic things. Figure that out. All right. The next thing that I showed you all how to do was start using the puppet pin tool, which if you are a beginner in After Effects and you want to keep it more simple, this might be the route for you to explore using puppet pin versus using Duik. Puppet pinning can still be very messy and it can be frustrating, so it's a bit up to you. But I can come up to my puppet pin tool and I can start making points on my arm. And you can see once I start to make points, how it starts to affect the arm when I start to drag it around. And it does some weird bending usually, which is one of the reasons why the puppet pin tool is a little bit funky. But if we're just trying to maybe do small movements, something more like, I don't know, like a wave or like kind of patting the stomach, we would be able to get away with it perhaps. And we can always see where our original shape was if we kind of like drag the puppet pin over here, and where our original shape was, we can see that the yellow outline. We can also turn on the mesh, so you can see just select it again, I think. Yeah, so turn on mesh, we can see the mesh down here. There is another tool as well, the Puppet Starch Pin tool, and I'm going to apply that, and you can see what that just did to my arm. So I'm going to Command Z, so it's a bit more round and noodly. If I put a starch pin tool between my two puppet pin tools, we can see it starts to get a bit firmer. And the way in which the arm interacts with it, or that the puppet pin tool now interacts with those starch points, is a little bit different, a little less noodly and a bit more as if it has bones or something like that. So those are great. I do want to draw your attention to one other puppet pin. I'm going to delete that one, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say Puppet Advanced Pin Tool. So this is going to allow us to do some weird stuff. So this is, it allows us to change the size of the pin tool, which is strange. I'm not sure why you would need to do that, to be honest. It allows us to change the position, and then it's also allows us to change the angle of the pin. So I think that's the one thing that might actually be helpful with this tool is and how it's different than the regular puppet pin. So this is the regular puppet pin where we can move it around. The advanced tool, it allows us to move it, but it also allows us to change the angle in some sort of way. And I think depending upon your warping, sometimes it's necessary to change the angle to minimize some of that warping. And then there's this last puppet overlap pin tool, which I think this, if you select it, it has to do with the order of the puppet pieces. So if I had two different puppet pieces, we can't see it here because our puppet pieces aren't really overlapping. Maybe if I'm not 100% sure if this will work, but we can try. Okay. Come on. You can see I can start to do the same thing with the leg. Let's see. So I'm going to move the arm down to have it overlap with the puppet tool of the leg. And maybe now. Not what I'm expecting. I know that it has to do with the order of the puppet pin, and like if you want something to be on top of something else, but it's technically like behind it in the layer stack. I'll have to figure that out a bit more, but for now, that's what we got. All right, so I've got my puppet pin tool in my arm, and that will be good enough for now. I want to show you how it appears down in the effects. So within arm, I can open it up, and now I have effects and transform. If I open up effects, puppet, mesh, deform, so we're going really far deep into this. And then we have all of these pins. The best way to get to this and not have to deal with all of this information is just by hitting U on the keyboard. And that's going to bring up the key points that, or the keyframes. And you can see here, this is interesting. So puppet 1 pin right here, we have a position. Puppet 3 pin right here, we have a position. Puppet 6 pin, this one, that's the advanced tool. So we have position, scale, and rotation, and we can change it in here as well if we want to. So bringing up U will bring up the key points, keyframes, and let's do a little bit of animating. Whenever you set a puppet pin tool, it's going to make a keyframe, and then anytime you move it, it's also going to make a keyframe. But we looked at how we could potentially animate the pins, so that maybe I get some animation like this. And I'm zooming in, and I want to make these a lot faster. So I'm going to hold and select, hold drag. And then I think most character movements, of course, happen pretty fast. We aren't really moving our arms quite slow. So something more akin to something around here versus where we had it just a moment ago. So that's movement 1. We've moved our puppet tool. Now I want to actually come in here and I want to change the rotation. So I'm going to come back here to my arm and I'm going to hit R on my rotation. And that brings up rotation. I want to set a keyframe at the beginning to say this is where it starts. Now I'm going to hit U again so that I can bring up the other keyframes so I know where they end. And you can see down here at the very bottom, that's where my rotation is. Maybe I'll bring it up like this. So lifting the arm and rotating the arm. And now let's make May jump into the air. So we can start with opening up position of the null. I'm gonna start here. And let's lift. So I set a keyframe. Let's lift May by doing this, the Y position. Sorry, set the keyframe at the start, move forward, lift May into the air, and then maybe bring back down. And this is not the same position. Let's delete that and then just copy and paste this keyframe. So I've selected it, copy, Command C, paste, Command V. And we can mess with the timing a little bit. If I right click these, keyframe assistant, I can hit easy ease. And that's already starting to feel a little bit better. Now you can start to see where we will continue to build this up. So the next thing I'm going to do is let's do the head. So I'm going to bring up rotation. Up in the air, I want the head to be rotating back a little bit. And then I'm going to copy and paste this keyframe again right here. So we have a little bit of a head kickback. Let's do the legs. So start right here, move here. I'm gonna have the legs kind of like also kick back in a way. Arm, leg. Let's do the other leg while we're on the legs. So I hit the stopwatch key to start it. And back down. All right, let's do the arms. So bring up rotation. And at this point, we just need to bring this one back down. And we would come back in here and we would mess with the puppet pins. And probably what I would want to do is I would want to do some overshoot and then bring it back so that we have the arm swing a little bit, you know, kind of like swing, swing, and then settle. That would be most appropriate. I don't know if I'm gonna take the time to do that right now. Let's do the other arm. Arm is up and arm comes down. And then I would also probably add some puppet pinning to this arm too. And lastly, we can maybe rotate the body a little bit. So bring this up. Let's rotate the body back just a little bit and then bring it back down. So we're starting to build a jump and there's a lot of things that we would want to do from here. Like this is just the beginning, but this shows you how we're starting to structure the puppet and do all the keyframings. What I would do now, what I would really want to do now is, of course, if we had a better skeletal structure, if we had some knees, we would want May to bend a little bit at the beginning, so anticipation, right? So bending down before the jump up and then jumping up. We would want to follow through with the arms. We would want to make sure that we add the second puppet pinning to the second arm. We could start to do things with the face as well, where we could make the eyes blink. And we'll talk a bit about face expressions as well. And then probably we added easing to the jumping. So let's just go ahead and start adding easing to everything else. But honestly, we would want to come in here and finesse it a little bit more. This will probably help some, but we'd want to do a bit more than just this default where we go into the graph editor, and of course the graph editor can be challenging sometimes. All right, so that's good for now. Trying to think if there's anything else. And I know all of you have different types of characters, and some of them are going to be easier to work with in this way, but do your best to get this started, of at least cutting out the character, cutting out the pieces, and ideally you will, if you at first just want to try using a structure sort of like this that we've created and using the puppet pin tool, you'll have an arm be a full object. If you plan on using Do It Basil, you'll have an upper arm, a lower arm, and a hand. So you'll break that into 3 pieces. Same with the legs. You'll have a thigh, a lower leg, and a foot. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Like we could even break apart the ears if we wanted to. That's something that we could do, and we could like have the ears be on just minimal rotation, and they could kind of like either grow or shrink or kind of like move back and forth just slightly to show some expression. Anything that you want to be able to move on its own, you're going to need a separate layer for it. So I hope this is helpful, and I hope y'all can get started a little bit on building the puppet, so or constructing the pieces of the puppet.